All right. Hello, my name is Katie Fromwith, and the book I read was Strangers Assume My Girlfriend is My Nurse by Shane Burcaw. So you can see some pictures of him and the book up here. This is his girlfriend, who is a large part of this book. So here is some information about Shane Burcaw. He's a speaker, blogger, entrepreneur, and author at 20 years old. He was born with spinal muscular atrophy, which makes the body very weak as it ages. Shane advocates for people with disabilities and has started an organization called Laughing at My Nightmare to provide resources and funding to people with spinal muscular atrophy. So Shane has a lot of different um, websites on the internet. He has a TikTok account, Instagram account, and he's very involved on social media, really advocating for the spinal muscular atrophy community and giving them resources. So here's some facts about spinal muscular atrophy from Shane Burcaw. The first fact is Shane talks about how muscles waste away. Muscles lose function as the body ages. Help is required for many tasks requiring movement. So this can mean a loss of the ability to breathe, a loss of the ability to swallow, because all of these require the use of muscles. So the reason that muscles waste away is because the body lacks protein. There's a neuron missing that means that protein cannot be processed properly, so muscles cannot grow and be maintained, so they decay. One of the cures to this that Shane has been on is called Spinraza, which basically tells the DNA to stop being idiots so my muscles don't get any weaker, which are Shane Burcaw's words. So it has the DNA stop killing the neurons that would keep the body from properly processing protein. It's an FDA-approved cure, and Shane was a huge advocate for equality. People with this disease are just like everybody else. That doesn't mean they're angels or saints or just really phenomenal people inherently. It means that they have a right and deserve to be treated as normal people. Some strategies that worked for Shane with schooling and kind of with life are giving him as much independence as possible. As Shane grew older, he required people to take care of him, to help him go to the bathroom and to help him eat and to help him get dressed, and essentially with every single daily task he required some help. But he found ways to be as independent as possible, and he was allowed to do that. In school, he was not constantly followed by an aide, so he could make friends and have that typical childhood mischief and kind of learn from that and build friends with that. He was included with his classmates. He was in gen-ed classrooms and not separated because he was disabled, which allowed him to make friends and to kind of build those social skills. It was important for Shane to feel normal, so that meant avoiding hypersensitivity. Friends asked questions, and Shane could kind of give his answers to them, and that kind of made it feel normal. There was no longer this huge elephant in the room that was separating Shane and his friends, which was Shane's disability. It helped destigmatize. Asking appropriate questions helps destigmatize disabilities. It was important to keep the typical school day structure. Shane was not held back academically because of his disability. It's important to recognize that having a physical disability is not synonymous with having a mental disability, and treat others with inclusion and with that respect. It was important to allow friends to be aware and involved in Shane's life, helping him get to the nurse, helping him on field trips. And it was important for educators to really listen to Shane's parents. They had lived with Shane for a long time. They were heavily involved in his life, and they could provide knowledge of how to do things. And so giving Shane's parents that respect and a place to advocate for Shane was very important. It was also important to be prepared for making situations wheelchair accessible. That doesn't just mean making sure that there were ramps and you can get into and out of the school with a wheelchair. It was important to know how the wheelchair worked and functioned, and it was important to be able to keep the wheelchair charged. And it was important to be aware of how expensive it was. There are a lot of challenges traveling via wheelchair, just keeping desks spaced apart so the wheelchair can get through, being aware that sand or wood chips are probably not very good for wheelchairs, which can be a big problem during recess, and kind of finding ways to deal with that. So here's some science behind spinal muscular atrophy. The cause is that there is a mutated or missing gene that causes the destruction of neurons that control motor skills, so muscles lose the ability to move and decay. It's caused by genetics. Complications can arise with this. There's difficulties swallowing, weakness in neck and chest. You can no longer hold your neck up because the muscles just will no longer work. And this can mean the loss of the ability to breathe and loss of the ability to eat and a weakened immune system. A lot of people with this disease have a shortened life expectancy. The cure for spinal muscular atrophy is called Spinraza. That's the FDA-approved cure. It helps maintain motor neurons. And then gene therapy and some drugs and some physical therapy exercises also can halt the destruction of neurons. And there still is a lot of research and clinical studies being done on different cures. Some common themes of the book were inclusiveness and the segregation that can really affect people with disabilities' lives. It was important to realize that the Americans with Disabilities Act did not take care of everything. There is still drastic need for improvement. Wheelchairs are very expensive and can be easily lost, taken apart, and lose charge. And it's important to keep this in mind. It's hard to travel with a wheelchair. Shane talked about how he went and rode an airplane for the first time, and he had to, his wheelchair had to be taken apart to fit in the airplane, and they couldn't get it back together. Mental segregation can have just as much effect as physical segregation. A lot of people have great intentions and with trying to include other people, but it can come off as very condescending and kind of segregate them mentally from their peers. So good intentions do not necessarily have good results, and we need to keep that in mind as educators. The quality of life is dramatically impacted by finances. So with many disabilities, if you have more money, it will be easier for you to get access to resources you need to help you with your life. And so part of Shane's program, Laughing at My Nightmare, is to help people without that funding get funding for things like wheelchairs and medication. Some insights about schooling were that it was really important to consider the lack of ability to go to the bathroom independently. It was hard and embarrassing for Shane to not be able to go to the bathroom by himself. And so keeping that in mind as educators, that going to the bathroom can be very sensitive, and just trying to keep it kind of normal and light was very important to Shane. Friends and inclusion and being seen as normal was huge at school. It was important for Shane to be engaged, and so being allowed to make those friends and having space to make those friends was really important. Parent involvement and insights were very helpful. Again, letting Shane's parents be involved was critical to Shane's success. And it was important to Shane's development, just like any person, to have room to make mistakes and not constantly be supervised. Having those discussions with friends that you might not want to have around teachers, or getting into mischief that you might not want teachers to see, is an important part of developing as an adult. And Shane was able to do that because he wasn't being constantly followed by an aide. Some quotes from the book were, "Life is precious and beautiful. No amount of coughing is going to change that." And I felt like this just really highlighted Shane's outlook on life and how important it is to embrace life and how beautiful and valuable life is. The next quote is, "People were overwhelmingly content to support her decision simply because living a worthwhile life and living with a disability are not compatible for a disturbing amount of the population." This was talking about a girl who decided to end her life at a very young age because she was born with spinal muscular atrophy, and she was met with overwhelming support on the internet. And Shane talks about how discouraging that was, because it kind of means that in order for life to be worth living, a person should not be disabled. And that is simply not true at all, which you can learn in this book. "I've been involuntarily preyed upon too many times," was one of my favorite quotes. It made me laugh to think of people just coming up and asking to pray, and kind of what an invasion of privacy and how odd that is. Elementary school brought with it the shocking realization that I was expected to allow people other than my parents to help me with these private aspects of my care. Going to the bathroom was a big deal for Shane in elementary school, middle school, and he usually just didn't go. And so keeping that in mind as a teacher, that this is an awkward thing for someone with a disability or someone in general. So just being sensitive to that and aware of that is important. My last quote is, "We are just going to keep having fun, taking risks, and finding new ways to help people living with spinal muscular atrophy get the items they need to thrive." And this is just kind of Shane's mission statement going forward, helping people with this disease to get what they need to thrive. And that was one of the big themes of the book, is people need to have resources to be successful. After I read this book, I was very curious about kind of what Shane's life looked like with his girlfriend, and if they were going to get married, or all of those little details. So I looked him up on social media and watched his YouTube channel and just kind of checked out his life and what he was doing. I was a little confused at the end of the book about how people could be so invasive. The idea that people would come up to pray for Shane without asking his permission was just kind of just odd. It made me a little bit angry, which was another one of my reactions, just because I think it's important to treat everybody and not expect someone with a disability to automatically want to be healed. So treating people with equality is important. And then this book gave me a lot of energy towards teaching and making sure that the classroom environment I create is one that is inclusive. Here are my sources. Thank you so much. That concludes my presentation.